Well, hello there. I need to say I've been putting this subject off because it touches so many memories of my own. But I think it's time that I discuss the matter of grief. The form of grief that everyone is most familiar with is the loss of a loved one to death. However, grief comes in so many different forms, and other events besides death create trauma and deep rooted pain. My desire is to examine different things that give examples of forms of grief that you may not even consider real grieving issues. I also want to offer some tools for dealing with grief. There's a lot of people online giving advice and sharing information and talking about issues that are relevant and they're important. Most are worthy of consideration. However, I find that very few are giving solutions and tools for dealing with their subject matter. I don't intend to reinvent the wheel, but I want to be a source of strength and encouragement. I'm planning to include a few stories from others who have approved my sharing their experience, and I have some experiences of my own. Of course, this grief session may have to be a possible series. I need to say that the response has been so great, and so many people want to participate and share their stories, and I am really thankful for that. There has been a formula, by the way, that was established long ago by a respected author on death and on grief. That was by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She wrote the book on death and dying and is considered an authority on the subject. And it has given us a template for what we can anticipate and what we experience as we go through the grieving process. The stages that she identified were denial, bargaining, anger, depression, and acceptance. I'd like to go beyond death because loss can be so deeply profound and painful that while the model Miss Ross gave us is absolutely right on and applies across the board, it falls short of suggesting its usefulness for various other kinds of grief. I have found that a good deal of grief is rooted in expectations. We know that life is unpredictable and death is imminent. However, while most of us don't anticipate the death of someone when it comes unexpected, we don't have time to prepare for it either. And my hope is that this conversation will be an opportunity to gather some skills and some tools we need to confront grief when it does come, beyond the death experience. When I say expectations are at the root of our grief, that's because most of the time we're in denial about conditions and situations in life. And they end in grief. Take, for example, marriage. I do believe that most people marry with the intent of growing old together, building a life, having children, sharing a home, perhaps building a business, enjoying companionship, and staying in love forever. But the statistics of the current conditions in our society regarding marriage indicate that more than 50% of all marriages end in divorce. And divorce can be painful, sometimes more painful than death. Because the loss in divorce can be so devastating, a person has to start their life all over again. And the person that they loved leaves a vacuum that now needs to be filled. Many say, it would have been easier if the person had died. That's because in their mind, they know that that individual is somewhere out there living a life, and that adds to their grief, especially when they're struggling themselves to move on. So let's review some of the reasons people marry that ultimately end because of the unmet expectations. In my practice, I deal a lot with divorce. In some cases, that loving, thoughtful, considerate mate becomes unfaithful or turns into someone that you didn't marry. They may become ill. And the idea of being a caretaker is not pleasant or desirable. It isn't what they signed up for. Then there's the military wife. She has a mate who's far away and deployed to an exotic place, and in her mind, she thinks they're off having an exciting adventure. And she's at home dealing with the kids and the routines. And life becomes mundane and boring. And that officer and a gentleman fantasy doesn't measure up to the reality, and it isn't as glamorous as they expected it would be. There's clearly the abuse of marriages, where one feels like they're a hostage in a difficult situation. In therapy, we inspect what red flags were ignored in the beginning. We do this so that we can avoid destructive relationship patterns. Take off the rose-colored glasses and look at the reality of what people are. I had a client who said to me recently something that was so profound. After being in a toxic relationship for quite a while, he said, most people are dating the other person's potential. I thought, wow, that was really a great insight on his part. So how many relationships began as fun, maybe best friend situations, shared casual social activities that turn into alcoholism or drug addiction? And they didn't get married for that. So divorce brings with it an enormous amount of grief. And let's not forget the sadness and the trauma it brings to the children involved in divorce. I certainly know well what that is. I've mentioned in previous videos my own parents' divorce when I was 5 that resulted in years of trauma. However, I do want to say something positive about marriage. I want to add that I have personally witnessed many marriages that exceed 50, 60, or 70 years. And what I've observed in those couples is they endured enormous disappointments and trauma in their lives. But they had a commitment from the onset. They were going to brave those storms together. I remember what my pastor would say when he was performing the marriage ceremonies. He said, when you say I do, you never really know what you're saying I do to. How true that is. So you make a commitment to God and you make a commitment to each other regardless of what life throws at you. And you agree to mutually confront whatever it is. 2 of the most inspirational marriages I've witnessed. One was Christopher and Dana Reeves. She married Superman, and indeed, he was a Superman. Even after losing all ability to function independently, their marriage thrived because of their commitment. And let us not forget Michael J. Fox and his wife, Tracy Pollan. In both of these cases, they took devastating conditions and turned them into life passions. It is not uncommon anymore, but in my day, many young women would get married to get out of a home situation that was unpleasant, only to find that their act of desperation put them in a dangerous and worse circumstance. Some of the other common conditions that result in grief are the disappointment of a child born with a birth defect that causes a parent to completely have to rethink what their dreams were for that unborn child. I had a cousin one time. She was born, well, she's still my cousin, but my cousin, during the years when medical professionals were prescribing thalidomide to pregnant women, resulting in their babies being born without limbs. This was a devastating disappointment to her parents. However, despite the shock and fear for her future possibilities, they never treated her like she was disabled. My cousin, with only a fin with toes protruding from her hip, or a tiny little arm that was a limb on her shoulder with fingers, was able to graduate from UCLA and became a successful attorney. Grief can be great motivation to not give up. Now let's look at some of the tools we can develop to minimize the negative and consuming results of grief, like depression, anxiety, panic attacks, isolation, repressing feelings and angry outbursts, and avoiding those who care and encourage us. We also need to be on the lookout for feelings of being a victim and having pity parties or feeling sorry for ourselves. We're not alone in these experiences, so don't be alone. Seek out a grief group, find a church, join a club, begin new and interesting hobbies, take classes, go to work, and get out of bed. It's okay to take a minute, but don't let that minute turn into days and weeks and months and years. I have found that music is comforting, but I have to be careful what I'm listening to. I don't want to listen to things that make the situation worse. I try to avoid becoming melancholy and sad, old songs that remind me of the loss. Grief comes in waves. Things can be going great when suddenly a smell, a location, running into an old friend inquiring about how things are going, and we're reminded that things are not going so well. Take a deep breath and honestly say what's happening, but keep it brief. Write a letter. Keep a journal. I journal every day. As a matter of fact, it's become an obsession with me. I've been journaling for over 33 years, every day. But it's very therapeutic. Take a walk. Get a dog. I love my dog. Take a trusted friend to lunch and find a great online video to work out to. Call someone you can honestly share with. Volunteer somewhere. Just get out of yourself. I'm here, friends. Let me know if I can be a helpmeet for you. And your comments are always welcomed. My next few videos will be from people who have wanted to share their experiences. They're exciting and amazing. I hope you'll enjoy them. So, God bless you, my friends. I am very grateful for the time you spend with me.